Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunworks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
All right, we're back on with another episode of Long Range Pursuit Podcast, and we've got a special guest today. It's Corey Mason from the Wild Sheep Foundation. Corey, we've interacted a little bit over the years, whether at Wild Sheep Foundation or when you were at Dallas Safari Club, but maybe just kind of give us a little bit of an intro, background, history, where, what you were doing at DSC and now what you're doing here at Wild Sheep Foundation.
Yeah, you bet. Well, guys, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. Certainly appreciate time to be together.
Yeah.
So, my really career has been in wildlife conservation. So, born and raised very rurally in West Texas, and through college with an undergraduate and a graduate degree in wildlife conservation. So it's really been a life pursuit there. And then went to work for a state fish and wildlife agency for 16 years with on-the-ground habitat management on state wildlife management areas, and then different types of programs working at the state and federal level. And in my last 5 years as a regional director, so 16 years there, and then went to Dallas Safari Club, served as CEO there for 7 years. And then just a few months ago, moved over to the Wild Sheep Foundation. And my duties here are COO and Executive VP of Conservation. So a really nice wide breadth of work, and super excited to be here.
That's pretty cool. The one thing that stands out there is, you hear CEO and COO and VP of this and that, but when it comes down to it, you're a wildlife biologist, right? And that's not to denigrate the scope of your role there, but I think that's really cool to know that you come from a background of actual, like, boots on the ground conservation.
Absolutely. Applied conservation at lots of scales, at the individual landowner level to working across landscapes, and then continental scale. My work at DSC, of course, I worked all over the world with management authorities, and picking that right up here at Wild Sheep Foundation. And then proudly, as you know, a very proud hunter that's been able to travel around the world. So that's a fiber of my being as well.
That's cool. I see some pretty nice trophies there on the wall behind you.
I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Well, so, I think there's a couple things to cover today, and, I think I definitely don't want to skip over some of the high level scope and vision behind the Wild Sheep Foundation, what the Wild Sheep Foundation does for conservation and for the animals that we love, and for us as hunters kind of living that pursuit and that lifestyle. We've also got Ben here, who is a recent first-time sheep hunter. So we've got some kind of cool story that we can pull in there, and some tie-in with the Less Than One Club, which is
I'm kicked out.
I'm kind of a big fan of that club and the concept behind that. So I don't know exactly where we dive in. Maybe some just high level, why the Wild Sheep Foundation exists, what you guys are doing for hunters and for sheep, and how that applies to our listeners, and how they can maybe be involved in helping further that cause too. That's maybe a mouthful.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to say, Wild Sheep Foundation is one of the most focused conservation organizations that really exist in North America, meaning it is all about putting dollars on the ground where the critical needs are, and if that's working specifically with habitat management, could be water development enhancement, could be prescribed fire, it could look like disease management, it can look like policy work at the state level and in Washington, D.C. That's really where the Wild Sheep Foundation is doing its work, and that's one of the things that was super attractive to me. And so, if it's that active sheep hunter that's working to work across the West and maybe up north or down south to chase a desert, or it's someone that's aspirational, that really desires to chase a sheep in 5 or 10 or 20 years, I think it's important to know that there's an organization that's focused solely on the management of those sheep and works really closely with our chapters and affiliates across, I would say, the Western United States, but it's really the entire U.S. And then working with management authorities, like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Forest Service and BLM, that really ultimately control the habitat that the majority of these species will either exist on or not exist on. And so it's that collaborative work and very purposeful work, and dollars on the ground. If you look at, just for example, last year, $11.1 million in mission program funding, And so it's really the organization that
Wonderful.
really puts the money where the mouth is.
That's really cool. That's got to do a lot of good for those wild sheep populations.
Well, it sounds like too that a lot of that work benefits more than just wild sheep. I mean, prescribed fire, water work, habitat.
Right.
I mean, it's more than just for anybody who's not necessarily describing themselves as a sheep hunter. I mean, it sounds like it helps mule deer, elk, the rest of the big game that we like to chase.
And that's a question I actually just kind of wrote down, and it's not necessarily to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, do you interact with or work with a lot of some of these other conservation organizations as well? I mean, you've got the Mule Deer Foundation and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. There's shared habitat and shared potentially some synergies there. I don't know how involved those organizations are with one another.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point both you guys raised, and 100%. So we work very collaboratively. For example, on the recent, say, Colorado Proposition 127, we work really closely with a number of those partners that you just mentioned. And I also have the privilege of serving on the board of the Congressional Sportsman's Foundation, which is another thing that really ties the whole, hunting and shooting community together, and angling community as far as that goes as well together. But like the partners that you just mentioned there, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, et cetera, there's a really close-knit community there, and where we work really closely together. Certainly a lot of collaboration on when it comes to policy initiatives and those things at the state level, when it comes to ballot initiatives and policy that really has the opportunity, like the migration corridor, huge collaborative efforts.
Yeah. I dare say just about nobody's just a sheep hunter or just an elk hunter or just a deer hunter. We're probably all a good mix of that thing. And in a few of our cases, wannabe sheep hunters. I'm pointing at myself there, but or aspiring sheep hunters maybe. But yeah, one of these days. I think Ben kind of mentioned that, but how do you see aspiring sheep hunters, right? Those guys that, I mean, there's a lot of money involved in playing in that game. For guys that dream of it, maybe they'll hope to draw a tag some years down the road, or they're looking to save up some money and go to Alaska or wherever. How do you see that kind of playing in for the aspiring sheep hunter versus the diehard guy that's headed to Alaska every year for $1 or, territories?
I think regardless of sort of the category someone wants to put themselves in, it really all begins and ends with healthy sheep populations, and it begins with biologists making good decisions, having the resources they need to ensure that there are healthy sheep populations, meaning good habitat to ensure healthy populations. And so it requires that work at state level. And again, the collaboration between federal agencies and the state level, and working across jurisdictions as well. And then, of course, Canadian provinces and Alaska, et cetera. And so, that's fundamental to all of it. If we're hunting next year, if we're looking at opportunities in 10 years, so irrespective of that, if we don't have that, it's really all for naught. But so I think that's really the tie that binds us all together. And it really is kind of to Ben's point earlier that, there's very few actions that are taken from a habitat perspective that really only impact a species. I mean, that really, practically speaking, doesn't exist. And so healthy habitats typically mean healthy wildlife in general, so, and again, sort of a tie that binds all of the hunters together. And there's opportunities there to engage across the community. And again, it's really that desire for that big rugged landscape, the pursuit of an animal that's, quite majestic, if you will, and just sort of being lost in a landscape that's so much bigger than what you can kind of envision.
That's pretty cool. High level, this sorry, I'm kind of just rapid firing questions here, but I'm kind of, as I hear more, stuff's coming to mind. I think about growing up as a young aspiring hunter, and sheep was not really on my radar. And I think that's just a function of the environment I grew up in, right? It was deer and elk, basically. Okay, maybe you'll draw a moose tag someday or a goat tag or something like that. And I feel like, at least in the lower 48, sheep hunts have been very, very limited and hard to come by. But I guess what I'm asking is, how have populations grown or declined over the last 10, 20, 30 years? Have we seen, I feel like we've seen a huge comeback in sheep populations, but I don't actually have any numbers to go off of. I could be completely wrong there. But, I guess kind of on a, maybe in the last, 5 to 10 year scale, and then like a 30, 40, 50 year scale, how do you see that rise or decline going? If that makes sense.
Yeah, there's trends of significant rebounds from many, many decades ago from overexploitation as well. But then there's also some real challenges in sheep management, and some of those are this disease interaction. And if you sort of start at the southern end of the range and move north between desert bighorn sheep and aoudad, I'm sure you've heard of Movi. It's a pneumonia type
Yeah.
illness that these sheep deal with. And so then as you move across the west, pretty similar between bighorns proper and dealing with domestic sheep as well. And the good thing is there's some really healthy conversations taking place, and a lot of progress has been made on grazing allotments and interaction between wild sheep and domestic sheep. So some good progress being made there. And then as you guys both know, as you go north to Alaska, some really brutal winters that have been hard on Dall. And so that's its own set of series of issues. But nonetheless, there's good management taking place. There's some challenges to sheep populations in some places, and in others are doing quite well. So, really the good thing is there's such a committed team of sheep biologists around it. And that's really one of the functions where Wild Sheep Foundation plugs in, is to provide that financial support, and in some places some expertise as well, to ensure that these populations are healthy and thriving.
Sure. On that Movi thing, I've been curious, is really the only remedy there simply isolating the species so there's no contact? Is there any science or any potential for solutions other than just trying to keep the two apart? I see that never really being an easy thing to solve, right? Because you've got these BLM leases and grazers in some of these places. You're probably never going to get rid of them, where it's going to be a long, tough thing to do. But are there any other solutions that have been explored, or some science that maybe is there as alternative?
Yeah, separation is clearly the first step there. That's really the ultimate desire, to try to just basically eliminate any kind of interaction.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, there is some pretty significant science taking place right now, and what that can look like in lots of different forms to eliminate a MOVI from those that are carriers, or those that are succumbing to it. And so, yeah, there's some good science right now taking place at some academic institutions. And as you would expect, those things are down the line. But yeah, there's good opportunities there as well.
Cool. Well, maybe we jump in a little bit into the Lesson 1 Club concept, and we can talk a little bit about Bent's Hunt. I remember, I can't remember exactly how many years that program has been in place, but I've watched that kind of grow and kind of blow up. It became a really big thing at Sheep Show a couple years ago, and it seems like a really cool thing to kind of pull in those aspiring sheep hunters, where it's been traditionally kind of a good old boys club, right? What do you see? Do you feel like it's been a valuable tool for recruitment for you? Is there other more substantive benefits to that for the conservation effort as well?
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity now. Now, Ben can't participate, of course. He's been kicked out of this.
Yeah, right.
Bummer. Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is a great tool for people to have an exposure, again, to not be too redundant, but to go back to that aspirational hunter that's looking for the opportunity, that really needs to draw that tag or have an opportunity provided to him or her. And so it's just to start with, it's this super fun environment. People are there to enjoy that like-mindedness, that fellowship, companionship around it. And it's a super high energy environment. And so with that comes sort of its own sense of community, but it really is a great opportunity for people to be, to number one, see what Wild Sheep Foundation is doing on their behalf. And then the opportunity to ultimately win a sheep hunt as well. So yeah, it's been a fantastic group, club, if you will, for Wild Sheep Foundation, and a lot of great relationships have been made out of it as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think I've only been to the sheep show once, but it was a blast. And at that point, I hadn't gotten kicked out yet, so I went to the banquet and everything. And I was just recently told that and maybe I'm wrong, but you can attend the banquet again and do the less than one I club. Is that right?
That's right.
I
So
believe that's right. Yeah.
I might have to go back.
National.
That's international, and so
Yeah.
um,
Well, I think you are like the classic example of what that program was built for, right? So I mean, let's dive into that. Let's talk a little bit about the backstory of how you acquired a tag and
yeah.
ended up killing a incredible
Well,
bighorn.
I think the tie to wild sheep is a lot of it's just putting sheep on the landscape, because the more that people participate in conservation, the more sheep we get, and therefore the more tags and more opportunities for everybody. So I think that's a really good way to look at it, especially for people like me. I think I was in the same boat you were as far as sheep hunting and goat hunting and moose hunting. It wasn't on the radar for us growing up, right?
Yeah.
Like, we grew up in a hunting family, but not even knowing what we were doing as far as deer and elk hunting, let alone sheep hunting. I think it was kind of just like, we'll save the $8 application fee, and and then as getting older and like realizing the opportunities, and I've always been one to just say, like, you can't win if you don't play.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in our backyard the week before I drew the tag, and we had a group of friends over, and we were talking about who's applied for what, and a couple of our friends said they didn't apply for sheep, and I'm like, well, why not?
I'm not gonna
They're
draw
like,
it anyway.
well, yeah, like, I'm not gonna draw it anyway, and like, I don't know, it's just, I don't know, like, yeah, it'd be cool, but I'm like, you just have to apply. It's $8 or whatever it is in whatever state. I'm like, just, you got to apply, right? And then sure enough, a week later, I opened my draw results, and there it was, So, so that's cool. So I only had 1 point, and I might get a little hate for that, but random draw, right?
But here's the thing, right? So you're going there, right? Is the number of tags allocated in the state? The population has to be at a certain point and health level to be able to issue enough tags, and to be able to issue random tags, right? So the way Wyoming is, and I think a lot of other states, is they have to have so many tags available in a unit before they start allocating random tags, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you and I, where we don't have 20 points, haven't been applying for sheep in Wyoming since we were, yay tall. The only chance we have of drawing that tag is through a random draw. So if those numbers weren't there, those random tags would not be allocated.
Yeah. And I think that's for anybody who's thinking about applying for sheep. I know I'm from Oregon, and so that's where most of my tag knowledge is probably. I know a lot of non-residents that are applying for units that don't have a random tag, right?
Yeah.
Like, check to make sure that you're actually applying for somewhere that has been allocated a tag, because, sometimes they don't have the tag numbers to justify it. But, yeah, you're right. So I think this unit has, I don't know, I think it was 20 tags total, between resident and non-resident. I could be wrong on that. And then I believe there is 2 random draw tags available. So
everyone's got the same odds in that.
Everybody has the same odds. I think it was probably sub 1% on that. So
it's pretty cool. But like you said, you gotta apply. My philosophy has been, if you want to get struck by lightning, you put up as many lightning rods as you can, right? And it probably won't happen, but if you've got 10 up versus 1 up, it's 10 times more likely. And I've drawn 3 or 4 once in a lifetime tags in the last 10 years, essentially by doing that, just applying in all the Western states for all the tags I can. And it's a lot of work, and cost adds up, but that's how you get there.
It's not a gambling addiction, but I'm like, now that I've drawn a tag, I'm like starting to think, okay, so how do I get that desert tag? Like, what do I do? I'm probably going to go to the sheep show and start putting in raffles, it's like,
I will admit, probably as much money as I've spent in applications in all these states over the last few years, I probably could have just gone and bought a sheep hunt in Alaska somewhere for about the same amount, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So
let's tell us about that.
You want to dive into the hunt?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, shoot, I guess figure out where to start here. Yeah, drew the tag, random draw. And at that point, it was like I couldn't focus on a single thing anywhere, at home, at work, anything. So one of the coolest things I think about drawing a once in a lifetime tag, and especially sheep and goat, is the people that come out of the woodwork to help you.
Yeah.
It's different with deer and elk and whatnot.
They're
People
so
out there,
secretive with all their spots.
yeah,
and
because you
everything
can
else,
get those
right?
tags a lot of the time. So, yeah, people came out of the woodwork, and it was actually like, it was pretty humbling to see and to be on the receiving end of that. I got help from people I'd never met, just reached out on Facebook and said, if you need anything or whatever, people put me in touch with other people, and yeah, lots and lots of people gave me insight. So thank you to all of them. And then some people want to come on the hunt, and about 90% of them won't be able to make it, so that's another piece of advice, like, know who you can count on to go on the hunt. And so we had you, Landon, and Jake. My dad came in and camp jacked, which was an awesome experience for him. And then my other buddy John had the stock, and his dad had some stock, and so we were able to take those in. And that was kind of the dream when I drew the tag, was have kind of this backcountry wilderness experience. It's been a couple years since I've had a horseback hunt, and just kind of wanted to do that with the bears and everything that we have. I've kind of hesitated to go into the backcountry here near Cody, and I knew with the stock it would be the opportunity to get back there and go see some of that country. So that was one of my goals, and yeah, luckily John came through and just helped me out.
Yeah. How many horses do we have coming out on the trail again? It was
When we came out, because we had to have, they went in
they
and
all
set up
back
camp,
out. Yeah.
and so we had fewer stock than we needed to really get it out. And so a couple of John's friends came in, and we ended up with 19 horses coming out of there. It was a long string. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that we didn't have more horse wrecks, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we can go into some of the equipment choices and
Sure.
whatnot. I'll start talking about the rifle. I talked to Garrett a little bit about, what would fit this type of hunt, and obviously we decided to do the 6.5 PRC in our climber system, which is the lightest weight rifle. We put a RS-25 on it, and then the Elevate bipod, and we kind of had that bipod conversation on one of the other podcasts. And then I think probably one of the things that a lot of people would have had a question on, or a decision to be made, was the suppressor versus muzzle brake. I think you and I love shooting with the suppressor. I wanted to take one, but I also didn't have the time to do a lot of training, and so I just cut and wait, and I opted to go just muzzle brake, no suppressor on that.
I think a sheep hunt, that's a pretty fair concession, and that's probably one I would have made as well. Honestly, half of it's probably fitting the rifle in a scabbard without a suppressor is probably one of the biggest things. But yeah, it's one shot way back in there, and it's kind of a pain.
It could be one shot, but we'll get to that. Should be one shot. Yeah. As far as overall equipment goes, I kind of had a lot of my stuff dialed in over the years. And there's a few things that I just wasn't going to make a change on just for a single hunt. And like one of those, I could have cut probably 4 pounds out of my pack if I had just gone with a different pack manufacturer. But I brought a couple highlights, I guess. I brought the Swarovski ATC spotter, their compact one, and I talked Landon into bringing his ATX. Like he wanted to bring his small spotter, and I said no. And actually, if I was to do it again, I would bring your ATX.
Yeah.
100%.
It was the right call. I'm a weight weenie.
Yeah.
And the lighter scope would be nice, but yeah, for that kind of hunt, you need some optics for sure.
Yeah, and there's a pretty clear difference between the two.
Yeah. Right.
And then let's see, sleeping system. I went with the quilt versus sleeping bag, and I kind of did a trial by fire on that and loved it.
Worked out.
Yeah, worked out great. We'll probably continue to do that. Upgraded to the Thermarest Neo Air, whatever. Then we shared some gear when we went backpacking, and that helped cut everybody's pack weights down. One of the big things I did a lot of research on was boots, and I talked to you a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
And I would recommend anybody who is researching boots to check out some of the Hunt Backcountry podcasts. I think it's Steve and Mark. I listened to probably
They've done a lot of
50.
work on boots.
Yeah.
For sure.
I listened to so many episodes of theirs, and they have a lot of backcountry knowledge that's for backpack hunters. That's really good. So I decided to go with a synthetic boot, kind of a shorter boot. And one of the things that was maybe not super ideal on the trip was I fight wildland fire in the summer, Corey, and I was pretty much gone. Like I was working from mid-June through September and
That's
had like no days off.
I can't even comprehend. I mean, you didn't have a choice, right? But drawing that tag and then being gone all summer to not be there to scout and get in the mountains, like I would have been dying inside.
It was
pretty tough.
It was tough. So I'll skip to that. I'll skip to the scouting stuff, but boots I went synthetic, lighter weight boot, and for what it was, they worked great, other than I didn't have enough time to really put miles in mountains.
Yeah.
And they felt great while I was wearing them around. I mean, I did a few miles.
Around and sheep country are not the same.
They're so different. Yeah. So got a few hot spots on my pinky toes and whatnot, but it's one of those things. It's like you can't actually know how they're going to perform unless you actually get into this deep, steep country.
Absolutely.
So those were a few things that I want to touch on as far as gear prep. Let's see, the scouting, like you said, not being able to get boots on the ground was tough. Luckily I had Jake and John do a little bit of scouting. They kind of John loves to take his horses out and just see new stuff anyway. He's a cowboy kid from Montana. He just wants to get out, right? So he went and scouted a few trails, and they saw sheep, and he said, I'm not going back in there. We're not doing that one. So we crossed that one off the list. He scouted another trail that they saw sheep on, but I kind of already knew about it, and it was able to be hunted on foot, like if I needed to later in the season. So I really wanted to, I guess, take advantage of John and get further in and try to get places that people weren't.
Couple dynamics here, right? You've got for good reason some very, very experienced, well-respected sheep guides in the area who are really good at killing big rams.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got some competition. I mean, 20 tags in that unit is not insignificant. I mean, there's a lot of country and a lot of sheep, but that's still enough when you're trying to kill top tier rams. You've got some competition. And on top of it, kind of the intel that you were gathered from what I recall, and kind of what I've heard as well, is that unit, it does not quite produce the quality of the trophy quality that some of the neighboring units do.
Yeah.
Right. And so you already had a little bit, some cards stacked against us trying to find that really once in a lifetime type ram.
Yeah. Definitely. And so that kind of played into some of our decision making for sure when we were deciding where to go. And to be honest with you, one of the things I did was I got onto every piece of social media and website and everything I could find, and I looked up if I could pin down that a sheep was killed in my unit.
Yeah.
I would find a photo, and I'd study it as hard as I could, and I'd put a pin on the map.
Yeah.
And by the time I got done with that, I think I had
You got a lot
something
of
like 9 to 12 pins
Yeah.
that I knew a sheep had been killed there, and I had a photo to go with it. So I was kind of trying to narrow down maybe the quality of sheep and the areas that those sheep were getting killed.
Right.
What I did with that information was I said, I'm not going to go there.
You're going to find the gaps in between those.
Yeah.
Right?
And what I was able to do was say, okay, this is the type of country that it seems like they're living in, right? Like I'm seeing a lot of pictures in these high basins, kind of classic sheep country, but you know, when it's your tag, you start running through every scenario that there could be.
Sure.
So I kind of went to where the country looked right, but I wasn't getting pointed that direction from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it worked out, and it could have easily not have. Like when you
Maybe
have one tag, I'm just purely jumping.
maybe some beginner's luck
Yeah.
there as well.
Yeah.
I know,
So.
but yeah.
So that was kind of the scouting process. I mean, I poured over on X. One of the other things I found that was pretty helpful is if you get on the USGS website, you can find LiDAR mapping. And that actually was able to let me see maybe some of the paths that were going to be just off limits. Like we can't hike there.
Yeah.
As it turns out, the paths I thought were going to be
It looks a lot
within there.
different on Onyx and on the topos than it does in real life. Like
Yeah.
who knew it was going to be big, scary country? And I'm no stranger to big vertical stuff, right? But it was pretty dang gnarly in some spots.
That's one of the reasons why Landon got invited
Probably
along,
another reason.
because I went on an ibex hunt and I thought I was going to lose my life.
Yeah, backstory, I almost killed him on an ibex hunt a couple of years ago, so he had his chance to return the favor.
I needed somebody who knew how to get around some cliffs,
Yeah.
and we got cliffed out in the first mile.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we thought we were going to make it way further that night, and we got cliffed out way before I expected to set up.
We
camp,
learned
so.
to navigate it, but it took some work to do for sure.
It also takes some time, like getting your feet under you. Like I was managing my. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a fear, but like when you're in it, you're aware that a misstep
Oh yeah.
could hurt.
And it's valid, and it's almost like getting your sea legs. It was interesting watching you and Jake. You know, that first day up there, you were, for a good reason, very, very cautious, right? And like I could tell you guys were struggling getting through some of that country, but by the second day, you guys were just cruising through it. Like it was night and day difference, and you just kind of have to get the feel for some of that volcanic rock up there. You get the kind of marbles on top of hard packed stuff that's a little sketchy, and you just kind of got to get a feel for that country.
Yeah.
And then you can get a lot more efficient moving around in.
Yeah. It definitely changed as we went along, for sure. You know, the other people to talk to are anybody in any of the biologists, and I talked to Forest Service employees and people that are doing trail maintenance, that sort of thing. So yeah, I did a lot of hours of research, just not allowed to actually know boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And you know, and that could be anybody who, you know, you draw that random tag out of state,
Right.
and don't have the time to go scout. But yeah, so that was kind of the prep. Like I said, I did so many days of firefighting that I wasn't. We were working, but it's not the same kind of work as having that, you know, 50-pound pack and hiking sheep country. So I wouldn't say that I was in sheep shape, but you know, that's kind of one of the things that I knew going into it, and having done some backpack hunting, you just got to take it at your pace and just don't quit, right? Like that's pretty much like all there is to it. Just don't go back to camp. So if we want to get into the hunt, let's see, field judging. I'll back up to field judging. That was another thing that I spent quite a bit of time on.
Well, having never hunted these
Right.
animals, right? You and I think you did it right in that you put a lot of time into it. I think back to the year I do a mountain goat tag in Utah. Same thing. I said, I have no idea how to tell if one of these things is big or not. I can't even tell the difference between a Nammy and a Billy. So I spent that entire summer like consuming every resource I could to get good at judging those animals, and it paid off in the end.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was able to kill a Boone and Crockett Billy. But I mean, otherwise, most people are killing, average or immature animals because they just don't know the difference, or shooting nannies.
Yeah.
So
You don't get the time to.
it's maybe
hunt
not
'em.
quite the same for sheep, but it translates. Being
Yeah.
able to understand, what's an old ram, being able to count annuli, all that stuff is crucial, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not the expert by any means, but some of the resources I found valuable. I think Clay Lancaster, Wild Sheep, might have actually posted this video of judging bighorn sheep, and I think it was one of the Lancasters had some desert sheep out on a table and kind of walked you through these. And he started with one sheep, and it's like, dang, all right, that's a nice ram. And then he puts out the one that's 15 inches bigger, and you're like, geez, like they don't even look like the same animal. So that was a good resource. Let me think. I guess I would just start there. And one of the other things he talked about was the interaction between sheep. So watching the herd language and that leader of the band of rams is often going to be the most dominant, and you'll see that and usually that is the biggest sheep too. So you'll see him come kick other sheep out of their beds and whatnot. And we saw that a little bit with this ram that I killed, even though there was only 3 of them. So that was interesting. And then like the body shape and size, I think that's something that applies to all big game in general, is especially horned animals, antelope, goats, and sheep. This ram that we killed, not to say that this is some spectacular ram, but he was head and shoulders above the 2 rams he was with. I mean, he had an extra, I don't know, 30, 50 pounds.
At least.
It's like he was a bigger animal. And when you'd see him by himself, he wasn't, you didn't go, man, that's a big sheep. You go, he's a nice sheep. But then when he'd get in with those other rams, you could tell. So yeah, those are a couple things that I found useful and actually applied, I think, on the hunt. Was looking at those couple of things. Been rambling now. We went in 15 miles, I think, on the horses, and
base camp, right? And
set up base camp.
Sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't love horses, so
I'm not I've never gotten along well with horses, and so yeah, that was
Corey's probably had his share.
The scariest part for me was climbing on a horse. The mountains, the cliffs. I'm not too worried about that stuff, but
yeah, and I don't blame you. We got lucky. I think all the horses were about whooped by the time we got to camp, so they settled down pretty good. Yeah, it was like a 15-mile ride in. And then from there, the plan was the backpack.
Yeah.
So you, me, and Jake split whatever camp stuff we could, and got another pony ride to the pass, and from there we took off. And we made it about 100 yards before we saw about 15 nannies.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging. Went another quarter mile. I spotted a band of 6 rams.
Yeah.
And
we're like, this sheep hunting thing's easy.
Yeah, we're like, they're all over. And that's one of the things about the unit is we kept hearing the population has been going down.
Yeah.
And I would be interested, Corey, if you know anything about the Wyoming state chapters and like how all of those kind of intermingle with the actual overarching Wild Sheep Foundation. But it seems like from what we were hearing, the population's been going down. However,
we saw
a lot of sheep.
A lot of sheep.
Yeah.
I mean, and we learned really quickly, we're looking at the very, very, very tops, and we learned really quickly that at least maybe it was time of the year or whatever else, but the ewes were up top.
Yeah.
And the rams were actually just below timberline, kind of down in the timber. That was kind of not what I expected. I think maybe you'd kind of heard that from a few other people, but we'd also studied some trophy picks, and we'd seen that a lot of guys were killing them down in the trees,
Yeah.
right? And so we learned pretty quick, okay, ewes are up here, but the rams are more down kind of on eye level with us, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I guess tie it back into conservation a little bit. When I checked the ram in, do you remember that one young ram in that first band of 6 that was coughing?
Yeah.
So the biologist was very interested.
Yeah, I'm
in
sure it
that,
was.
So, I mean, dropped him a pin, exact lat and long, that sort of thing. And so if anybody else is out there and sees coughing sheep or whatever, like, tell somebody, because that's one of the things. It's like, it probably goes through a population so fast.
Yeah.
And just totally ruin
I just didn't know, like, you definitely got that in the back of your mind, but like, is that just regular, normal behavior, or is that an actual concern to see that? And it sounds like it was.
Yeah, Corey, I mean, when do you start becoming concerned if you saw that coughing? Like, what's it look like?
Yeah, it's a good data point, and so maybe one data point certainly doesn't make a trend. But when he's looking at all the sheep populations, he or she is a biologist across the state, and he's recovering data. Healthy sheep here, and maybe some suspect here and there. So again, through seasons, across time, and certain units, they're just taking it all in and looking for things that would be alarming for them to know where to focus on. So those are kinds of pieces of information are really invaluable for the managers.
Is it something that's kind of ever present and, it comes and goes and hits certain animals, or is it something it's not there until it is, and then it like decimates the population? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if we're talking about Moby specifically, so when it's not there, obviously you're thankful for that, and you continue to work towards separation, right? But then when it is present, that's where in a number of states get into an assessment standpoint, like in a test and remove. So
Yeah.
they're testing sheep, periodically, and if they find chronic carriers, then they remove those sheep.
Yeah.
So once you have it, you're working to eliminate it by focusing on individuals that are chronic carriers.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cool. So yeah, anyway, we kept going and we got cliffed out, almost immediately. We watched those sheep for a little bit, and a couple rams that it was one of those things where you see the first rams and you really don't know what you're looking at.
And there were
right?
a couple nice rams in that band. And I guarantee you 9 out of 10 hunters would have shot one of those first rams and been tickled pink.
I just couldn't accept that I was probably looking at a big sheep, the first sheep.
Right.
So if it had been a big one, and I don't know, maybe I'd be regretting it when I reviewed the footage. But that night we camped, had your teepee blow off the top of us.
60+ mile/hour winds and a teepee. That was pretty fun. That
Sounded like
post camp.
Sounded like F-16s were flying over the top of us all night. I don't think you or I really slept a wink. Jake woke up and he goes, "Man, how'd you guys sleep?" And I was pretty good. And we're like, "Dude, don't even talk to us about it." Like, so we crossed the next basin. Landon said that this little cliff spot goes, and I said, I know what that means when Landon says that, it'll go. It's a little sketchy. So I knew what that meant. So I decided to drop 800 feet of elevation and go across the basin rather than risk my life. But we were crossing that basin, and Jake and I come across a set of ram sheaths, which was super cool. So we kind of got a 2-for-1 deal out of this hunt. And then that evening, I was freezing cold, ready to go back to the tent, and Landon looked up for one last look, and he's like, "Oh, there's a couple rams." So we looked at those quick, and again, it was like, dang, that sheep looks like pretty decent, And while we were looking at those, I did one last pan, and 3 more sheep come out of the timber about another last light,
like big mule deer would come, just out of their beds at the very last bit of light.
Yeah.
It was a very unseasonably warm fall in Wyoming this year. Like I've not experienced since being here. Kind of warm. And, I don't know if that's what it was or what, but, I kind of always figured sheep were more kind of active all day kind of thing, but we weren't really seeing that as much.
I kind of assumed that they were going to, even if they would get in the timber, they'd come out periodically during the day. Just my impression of sheep was that they kind of stayed on their feet and moved throughout the day.
Yeah.
And those rams did not.
All the
On the
veteran
2
sheep hunters
days.
are like, yeah, these
Yeah.
rookies don't know.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about. Yeah,
Never hunted a sheep in my life, so
don't take our word
have-
for it. I'm saying what my impression was.
just what I'd assumed. Yeah.
Yeah, what the ram that we ended up killing, he wasn't like that. So those 3 came out at the end of the day, and we couldn't tell what they were, but I was like, man, that one we should look at him again. So we saw him again that morning and decided, like, looking at the mass down low and his body size and again the way he acted with the other rams, it's like we should go get another look. And I think Landon been wanting me to shoot a sheep since we started the hunt. I think
I was mostly just ribbing you. I had to give you a little bit of my time, but when those 3 came out and that one was visibly bigger than the others, like even from a mile away, when you're saying, oh yeah, we should probably go look at that sheep, Jake and I are looking at each other saying, this dude is crazy. He's not sprinting over to shoot this ram, right?
I'm like
You're very, very even keeled and level headed, which is good because I don't think I could be that way on the sheep hunt.
Yeah. And it was actually kind of interesting looking back at the hunt because I wasn't ever anxious about it until this night. I was really enjoying the entire process. It was like just so cool to be in those. Yeah, because we were scheduled to be up there for 10 days.
Yeah.
So we're sitting on day 3, I think, and it's like we're not in a rush. We're not in a rush, and I think I probably should have been more of a rush because normally when it's like time to go, it's time to go, and I was kind of lollygagging a little bit, but anyway, they bed down. We go after them. They disappear on us, and we spend all day working our way down. And I don't like to pigeonhole myself into like one plan of attack.
Yeah.
But we just kept working down that ridge, and again, probably 20 minutes before darkness, the sheep came out of the timber, and they were way down low. I mean, they were down by the creek almost.
Not where we expected it.
Not where we thought they were.
We knew they were in there somewhere, right? But
yeah.
Right below us in range.
Yep, 560, I think. And it was like a bomb went off on our side of the mountain. Like
we had all day to be prepared for that shot, and we weren't.
We weren't. Yep. Yeah. We did not do our due diligence on that, and that's it goes against a lot of how I feel like we normally hunt. Like, we preach it. So bomb goes off. Landon's like, sheep are right there. It's like, get your spotting scope on them, get a phone scope on them. I gotta get my gun. Actually, Jake, get my gun. I'm gonna set up the tripod. Also, Jake, get the camera. Like, all this stuff's going on, and those sheep are just looking up the hill like, what are these idiots doing? It's like, so and you're wound up, and you're like, just shoot him. And I'm going, I am not ready to shoot him, right? And so they go into the trees, and they know something's going on, and they kind of work their way up the mountain, and he comes out and stops broadside, and I torch it off and watch the dust fly over his back.
That was like the most heartbreaking thing. Like,
and I just
all the shots ever made. And I'll tell you, like, I will, Ben's gonna blush. This dude is the best shot of anyone in this building.
Yeah,
I will personally put him up against anyone in this building. He's a good shot.
That's not true, but I can shoot, and I haven't ever missed a big game animal before. And I waited until a once in a lifetime bighorn sheep tag to just screw it up, and so range or touch it off. He runs. Him and his buddies split up, and he runs up the hill, and I saw my shot go right over his back, and I wasn't sure if we were good left or right. Well, I think everybody else was spotting on a phone scope, and this is another thing that I don't personally like, is spotting in a phone scope is not as effective as spotting with your eye on the glass. And so none of us realized that the wind call was actually the primary reason that we missed. And we've been talking about wind all afternoon, and basically I got a number stuck in my head, and then when everything was going down, I didn't reevaluate the wind call.
So and you should have had a better spotter there.
Well,
calling that for you, right? That's on me.
No, it's not on anybody in particular. Like, it is what it is. Ultimately, the shooter makes the decision, but that ended up on the next shot. I held the same wind and cut the elevation.
Yeah,
and it went just right underneath his chest and just in front of him. And it's like, oh my God! Like, are we doing this right now? Like, it's becoming a show. And so he ran off further, stopped, getting ranges, but I can't pinpoint why was I missing. Right?
I'll tell you, man. I respect so much that you said, okay, I'm done. 2 missed shots. I'm not pulling the trigger again. Right?
Because we got put up again.
You had shots all day long after that. We got a little farther out and a little farther out and a little farther out, but I've seen you make those shots 100 times, right? And but you knowing that, hey, there's something's off. I'm not just going to keep lobbing bullets at this thing. Shows me how much respect you have for the animal and how much maturity you have as a hunter to be able to say, you know what, I'm gonna hold off.
Yeah,
and it paid off in the end.
It did end up working out, and that's the thing. It's like, you just have to make a decision, and like, it is what it is, right? And when you can't put your finger on it at the time, you're better off just figuring it out and doing something different. So we actually dug a hole in the side of the mountain with our trekking poles. Like, we took the hill down about that far and made a spot flat enough for the three of us to sleep, and bivvied there. Because I guess the follow up is the ram ran up, caught up with some ewes, but his buddies went down, and so the ram ends up watching, and we're done shooting, so things are starting to settle down. The ewes aren't crazy.
Yeah,
we just watched him till dark, and he came down to his buddies, met up with them. They got on these cliffs, and then it got dark, and they seemed to relax. So fingers crossed he'd be there.
Maybe they'll be there in the morning. Yeah.
Wake up that morning,
sure,
there they are,
right there.
Yep, and they're up at the top, and at that spot, there's no way to get to shoot from our side of the canyon. So Jake and I bail off, and this is where it's kind of like, all right, now it's actually game time. We throw all of our stuff haphazardly in our packs. We drop down to the bottom, drop all our stuff at the creek, and my goal was to get preferably inside of 400 yards on them. So we kind of skirt underneath them, and I'm keeping eyes on them. And at one point, I sneak out prone. There's a ram up there on this kind of outcropping, and I sneak out prone. I get a range, and he walks off into the trees. It's like, okay, so now what are we doing?
Yeah.
Get up to the top. By now we made a giant loop, and we're about 2,500 feet above our horse camp.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for him, because the wind's not good to push in on him. It's so steep. Wait there for like 2 hours. Nothing's going. Landon was actually, we left Landon on.
I hung back on the spotter, basically.
On the spotter, so he could inReach us in case we blow him out of the country. He's like, you basically hadn't seen them since we hit the bottom of the
So
creek.
I watched them feed right over the top of that ridge where we saw the blast, right? But essentially once they were gone there, I couldn't tell, I assumed they were bedding off the backside of that ridge and just didn't really know how far they were exactly. And so, I'm kind of helpless at that point. Once they're fed over, it's, I can tell you where they're at, I last saw them, but I don't know where they went from there.
From our inReach messages, I thought that they had just gone into those trees and you couldn't, you basically just lost them in the trees. So I didn't know if they were in on our original side of the mountain or if they gone over the
A
top.
little bit of a miscommunication there. Yeah.
Just some confusion, or we just don't know. But long story short, we decide we're out of water. We've had one water fill up basically in these 3 days. And, it's like, we just need to make a play and regroup. So, I come around down low on the backside of the ridge, hoping that if they are in that same patch of trees, the wind's going to miss them. And I take one step past this little group of trees, and I look down to my right on the opposite side of where I thought they were. And I see what I think's the body of a ram, and then one's head just snaps.
Yeah.
And it's looking right at me. And I'm like, here we go. So have the 5-minute stare down. He relaxes. I sink to the ground, shimmy basically on my back, shimmy around, get all my stuff set up, and come out. And you got 3 rams that you don't know if they're the same sheep or not. You try to figure out which sheep is which, and do that whole puzzle. Finally determine which ram I believe to be him, and luckily one of the sheep had some scarring on him.
Yeah.
So I was able to.
It was pretty obvious.
I was able to power deduction. Okay, that's my ram, because his head was kind of behind a tree, and 250 yards steep downhill. I had the elevate bipod, and I pulled the legs all the way out, put them on my toes. So I had the bipod in a sitting position, and then my toes cocked up, and I was able to just shoot just over that kind of lip of the hill and the grass. And 250, one and done, good shot. Felt so good to bring it home on the same sheep,
Right.
to turn it. Not that it wasn't a hunt before, but it's that extra chapter in the story that's just so cool to have. It kills me to have made that screw up,
But it makes it the memory more poignant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And now I'm not I don't know, maybe it's not such a burden, because I knew it's gonna
that ends well.
point, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the story. And I mean, it was he went 15 yards and beautiful spot, and just a so cool of a sheep. His
old, gnarly, had big chips out of his horns.
His horns are different. I took him into the taxidermy shop, and he's got they're really rough, and then smooth, and he's kind of hard to age, and he's got dark horns. They're just a little bit different than the other ones there.
Right.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Did the biologist aged him at 9.5?
9.5
It was.
Yeah, he said, he's
I
hard.
kind of felt like it was 10.5. I would be surprised if there's another there. It kind of gets tough to read at the very basis there, but
yep. And that's kind of where he was at. He's like, he could go 2.5, but I don't know. And my judgment's probably 9.5. But this unit was all of the guides, all the outfitters' guides, local knowledge said, you should really consider shooting, not to put numbers on it, a 160 or better sheep.
Yeah.
The guides kind of said 165. I told you on the hunt, the number is really just to get you kind of into that class, that zone, that
older, mature ram.
Try to find what you would be really proud of to take home. That's really what it is. And so he went above all that. The biologist said that the average sheep coming out of there was 6.5 to 7.5. So I was stoked to get something that was older. And I gotta be honest, we didn't spend a lot of time aging him. Yeah. We mostly went off of body size and kind of that belly.
Yeah.
Just looking at the overall sheep rather than,
right.
Which I understand you probably can't base like Alaska has regulations. You can't necessarily
Sure.
do that in some places, but yeah, any
Good
legal
enough.
ram, it was good enough, and it all worked out the way, all that prior research really paid off as far as that goes. So yeah, just super blessed. Got kicked out of the less than one club on
You had
that ram.
you had your shirt there and your red tape and everything
Yep.
for your photos. We'll probably post one up here.
Yeah, I was prepped for that. So yeah, just and like you said, it's just you can't go on a hunt unless you apply.
Yeah.
And going to the Sheep Foundation and going to the banquet or going to your local chapter or whatever. A lot of them have raffles, and buy your membership. It's not that much to put a little bit of money
Yeah.
towards
So
sheep
it
and
goes to a good place. But
conservation
it
and-
actually makes a difference. But I mean, that is that dream hunt experience trophy that all of us are after.
Yeah.
Right. Like I guarantee you there's not a guy listening that's like, man, I wouldn't like to experience that. Right. And it takes conservation to get us there.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. That's a freaking cool story. I was feel very privileged to have been able to be there, even though I wasn't actually there for the kill.
Well,
I got to sit on the other side, watch it all unfold.
well, that's
Very
what
proud, but
experience and everything
yeah,
brings to the table. I mean, there's no telling if we would have even ended up in that same spot if you hadn't been there to
who knows,
help.
right?
So,
It all works together in the end.
yeah,
So,
for sure. But
yeah, pretty dang cool.
well, the sheep show's in January, right?
Yeah, January 16 through 18, there in Reno.
Awesome. What they got some pretty good tags slated for giveaway there at that show this year. Seems like every year they got a couple good ones.
Yeah, there are. So effective bench points, there's some fantastic raffles, good opportunities for a whole different type of really a slam in different capacities there. And then from international to obviously some stuff here as well. Of course, the slam of sheep as you'd expect North America. And then of course some of the conservation permits as well, very similar lineup as last year. But Ben, I'd remorse if I didn't say congratulations on what a great story. And of all those numbers you mentioned, to take a 9.5, 10.5-year-old ram, whatever the end number was, fantastic sheep. Well done, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Well earned, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of luck and a lot of hard work to get you there.
It all worked out faster than I anticipated. I mean, Gunworks probably wasn't going to see me till November if that hunt hadn't worked out. So,
Yeah, we're probably all thankful to have you back.
yeah.
After that.
Yeah. But I guess I don't know if we're drawing down here or not, but Corey, like the sheep show is obviously one way to go and contribute. And even if you're not there to hunt sheep, I mean, any hunter, that's one of the best shows.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've been to a lot, and that is one of the best shows, period.
Just the people are passionate. Like it's got a very finite driven focus and purpose, I think, is what all the other shows are awesome, but they're a little bit broader based, and I really like the focus of purpose behind the sheep show in particular.
It's really easy to see like where the dollars are going, but for guys who aren't going to make it or want to get involved, maybe they're on the East Coast or something. I know there's a lot of different chapters, and I recently heard like I think Iowa or somewhere has a chapter, like somewhere I never would have expected. So maybe you can talk a little bit about other involvement.
Yeah, you bet. So in addition to Wild Sheep Foundation proper and of course the Sheep Show, middle of January there are a number of chapters across the United States. And if they're, say, East Coast based, to your point, there's a Midwest chapter, and then most recently Southeast as well, down in the Georgia area. So there's lots of opportunities to plug in and go to some great events, opportunities to support, conservation projects, put your name in the hat for some great raffles. And there's a lot of opportunities. And of course, those that can't make the sheep show and want to participate online, some of the auctions and all that, all that can be found at wildsheepfoundation.org. So lots of ways to plug in.
Cool. What any kind of last takeaways for our listeners, Corey? I know you guys are doing a lot for them, and yeah, what can a guy do to make the biggest impact uh, for the future of sheep hunting?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. Number one, engage somehow, somewhere. If you have a state chapter, that's a great way to do it. Some very healthy, super engaged chapters and making great differences at the state level and some at the multi-state level, supporting their game and fish agencies and actively engaged in policy comment letters and supporting conservation dollars on the ground projects. So that's a fantastic way to do it. Obviously, Wild Sheep Foundation proper, another great way to do it. And I think there's a couple of things too that, hunters, and to take a little bit of a dirt road away here, but hunters in general are pretty apathetic when it comes to making their voices heard. You can make your voice heard through these organizations, but also, when you see things like action alerts that go out to memberships, if it's from any organization credible, conservation organization like Sheep or RMEF or MDF or fill in the blank there, and you see these call to action, a state policy issue or federal policies, take those seriously. Contact that elected official and make your voice heard. The hunting community, the conservation community stood up in Colorado, a couple of weeks ago and defeated that Proposition 127. That was against completely everything we know in wildlife conservation. And that was a big stand for the hunting community and the conservation community and to support Colorado Parks and Wildlife, frankly. But that was just the first battle. No, there's many more down the line, but we took a good stand there. We, as a collection of hunters and conservationists, took a good stand there, and just don't be afraid to engage. Make your voice heard is one of the things I'd really leave everybody with.
Awesome. I think the thing that we kind of alluded to here, but I think I would just reiterate is it's easy to sit back and look and say, okay, I've got, I'll pay my membership dues and I'll apply for some of these raffles. And I know this money goes to conservation, but what does that actually mean? And we actually didn't catch it just before this, but Corey, you mentioned how boots on the ground, actual in the field conservation efforts are happening, right? The money's not just going to some bureaucrat and sitting in banks and banquets and things like that. You're actually out there building guzzlers and doing these things to actually support wildlife, which it really is what matters at the end of the day.
Yep, that's exactly right. And really very little of the other matters if we're not making a difference, and providing better quality habitat, trying to secure as many acres as we can, because as much as you hate to face the reality of it, there's more, human involvement on the landscape, a growing human population, habitat fragmentation, all those kind of things. So we have to invest in the wildlife resources, and again, in the research and science around them, and make good decisions every day. And, part of that is policy interaction. We have lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that work there and at state level as well. And just know that these organizations are doing that work. But importantly, if the dollars aren't reaching the ground and making a difference, you're probably not supporting the right organization. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for jumping on today, Corey. It was great chatting with you, and always fun to rehear Ben's story, even though I was there for it. So yeah, good time. Then
Thanks, Corey.
Yeah, all the better for the future of wild sheep.
Appreciate it, guys. And again, congratulations, Ben. Great story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll catch you soon. Thanks a bunch, Corey.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunworks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunworks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.